Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Small Screen Star Wars. As always, I'm Julian Mush. I'm joined by Rachel Wilkinson.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about The Bad Batch today, Season 1, Episode 12, Rescue on Ryloth. Before we get into that, though, I'm going to remind everyone to do a couple things. Go to check us out on social media at Tower Babblecast on Twitter and Facebook. Head over to our website, smallscreenstarwars.com. That's right. I've been saying towerbabblepodcast.com, which is also true, and it does take you to the same place. But I paid for the smallscreenstarwars.com domain name, so use that one.
Ooh, sweet.
When you're thinking about Star Wars stuff, and you're like, what's the latest? What's happened? What is Small Screen Star Wars up to? Just type that into your search bar, smallscreenstarwars.com, and you'll find all the answers you need. And head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/towerbabblecast. You're going to be able to help support the show there, but you get also access to a monthly film club that we do, and that's exclusive to the Patreon. And this month, we're going to be doing the Sly Stallone vehicle. That's a joke from Dan from the last podcast. Driven. So it's for 2001 movie. And I've never seen this movie before, so I'm kind of excited to see it. And
I was hoping you were going to do Over the Top, because that movie's better.
Or a Cliffhanger, or there's a couple good styles.
No, it's all about arm wrestling. What more could you want?
That doesn't sound good to me. I'm gonna be honest.
Stallone is like a truck driver who is a competitive arm wrestler.
Okay.
And I think there's something about him being a shitty dad in there too. Sorry, I shouldn't swear, but he's a bad dad, and he's trying to get his son to like him again.
By doing arm wrestling?
Something about arm wrestling. Enough. I'm pretty sure he's like a bad dad, and yeah, he's a trucker, and he has one really strong arm. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's the arm that he uses for the like air brake on the truck. I don't know.
Okay, right. Yeah, you gotta have a strong arm for the air. Yeah, that makes sense.
I saw this movie once a very long time ago, but that is my terrible movie recollection.
Okay,
summarize of it.
Okay, appreciate it. Not the movie we're reviewing this month.
Well, you should.
Driven, and then after that, you'll be able to join us because we are doing Face Off. It's been officially deciding.
Nice.
So, all right, let's get into this. Again, this is Season 1, Episode 12, Rescue on Ryloth. We're going to be dissecting this whole thing. So spoilers for all of the Bad Batch, and really all of Star Wars is up for grabs here, but we'll warn you if we're jumping into other
Sometimes we
other
give
pieces.
Warnings.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's like, come on, you gotta stay up to date with all your Star Wars stuff,
I mean, yeah, agreed.
But again, we'll let you know if we're jumping into some other territory. Okay, Rescue on Ryloth, interesting title because it calls back to the 3-part. Well, I guess is it 3 parts or at least 3 episodes from the Clone Wars that all had a very similar title. I think there's like Siege over Ryloth and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like Liberation on Ryloth. I think is the last one in that arc.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of the alliteration here, and again, just kind of really completing that kind of the full circle on the Clone Wars kind of callbacks to Ryloth and everything that's kind of went on there. So we pick up and we're back, and I mean, we kind of suspected that we'd be back this week just because we looked at the title, which I guess turned out to be right. So I'm going to be using that now as my go-to reference. On IMDb if I'm looking at next week. And spoilers for next week, it looks like it's going to be called Infested, whatever that means.
Oh.
We don't know what that's about.
Sounds creepy.
I hope it has those spiders from Mandalorian Season 2 in it.
No, I don't want the ice spiders again.
I mean, neither do I.
That was too much
technically. And this actually, what's interesting is that this episode is sitting at an 8.2 on IMDb, and last week's episode, Devil's Deal, is only sitting at an 8. And for my money, I think last week's episode is better than this one. So, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know. I think they're about equal for me, maybe, but maybe it's just because the allure, because last week was so a little bit more exciting. But when we're seeing the same characters this week, it's not as exciting, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a little less.
There's way more action in this week's episode, I think.
True.
I mean, I don't know. It's like it's a 2-part arc, right? Which is, we haven't really done a lot of that, not since really the pilot have we kind of spent multiple episodes on one place and one idea. But I just think that there are elements of this episode that really work great, and then others that just feel a little bit rushed. So I think it's just last week is just a little bit more patient. But that being said, I do appreciate some aspects of this episode, especially some kind of subtle facial animation work that I think does a lot of work for storytelling purposes.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We'll touch on that as we get to it. So yeah, we start on Lesu, which is, by the way, the name of the capital. I just called it the capital last week, but it is called Lesu. And the establishing shot is very reminiscent of last week's establishing shot, but it's like dark and gloomy. It's this kind of mirroring in stark contrast to kind of last week's opening establishing shot that I think is very cool. This kind of this visual impression that things are just much darker here now than they were last week, you know?
Definitely.
So Rampart and Hauser are entering the holding cells. Rampart is antagonizing Cham as he tells him that he's going to, quote-unquote, handle his followers and threatens his daughter. Obviously, this isn't taken well. There's this moment where he kind of goes to his wife, Alina, I want to say. I can't remember her name now. I feel like Eleni. I'm saying it wrong. And he goes to her and says, well, you're the reasonable one. What do you think? And she's kind of like, she does her whole, she stands by her husband, obviously.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
And obviously, they were betrayed. So it's like there's not really much of a conversation to be had here.
No, of course not. He's trying to frame them for assassination attempt. Like, why would they ever be like, yeah, you know what? We should probably just switch and be on your side now. Like, what?
Well, maybe he's hoping for a turncoat. I don't know.
I guess, but I think he's just, trying to
it's a prod.
get to go to the mom and be like, oh, maybe she will, give up where her daughter is to try and save her, help her, yada, yada, right? But obviously they're like, no, Harry can take care of herself. Like, they're not as worried about her, but still.
Right. I mean, they are certainly.
They are worried, but they're not worried enough to give into like that easy of
right. It's a little like
trap.
Yeah, I get. You're right. Absolutely right. They're goading them into like just to try to maybe spur on some like internal drama or whatever, but it doesn't work
for sure.
And we have Hauser kind of looking behind, like he's standing behind him. And he's kind of looking conflicted. We've kind of seen this look in him now multiple times over the last couple of weeks. And he's giving, and he gets the stink eye really hard from the Syndulas as they walk away.
Yeah.
Just really like, oof, like, you son of a bitch,
Yeah.
And Rampart then instructs Hauser to round up and arrest Cham's sympathizers. But Hauser pushes back. He does this many times this episode, saying that the people aren't insurgents and that they have no grounds to arrest them. Rampart, quote-unquote, reminds Hauser that it's warranted because they're supporting a menace who tried to assassinate the senator. Again, Hauser pushes back, saying that he was there and he knows it wasn't from his forces and it wasn't Cham's forces, but he doesn't know where it came from.
I think he's lying. I think he knows.
He does know, but he can't say. He's not in a position to say.
Right? I was surprised about him pushing back as much as he did in that scene. I was like, oh, okay, he's like actually straight up being like, I saw what happened, and is like letting Rampart know, like, no, I know that's not, they didn't do that, right? So I thought that was very interesting. I think he obviously knows that Rampart had something to do with it, but he's just trying to be like, oh yeah, I don't know, I didn't see. And,
right.
Because he doesn't want to get straight up probably murdered if he admits to knowing or accuses him, right?
Because if he seriously, like, it's a tough balance, right? So this kind of classic problem of trying to do good inside of a bad system, right?
Exactly,
like you can't really fix a bad system from the inside, and he knows that if he try to pushes too much, he could be court-martialed, and he loses the power he has to actually affect change.
Oh, for sure, exactly, yeah.
He has to kind of walk a line. So I think what he's doing here is really smart. So what he's trying to do, or it seems like he's trying to do, is trying to just lay out the facts and just be like, this is how it is, whether not from your perspective or my perspective, that this is just how it is. If we arrest these people, it will incite an uprising.
Right. Like, it's almost like he's trying to be a little bit more neutral when he's talking to Rampart and being like, hey, like, that's probably not the smartest plan for you because it's not going to go over well with the public. Yeah.
Exactly. Trying to just kind of like, speak to him on his level, right? Kind of try to be like, let's be smart about this, right? But I mean, obviously, we know that Rampart has other plans, so that's not really going to work. But for Hauser's perspective, he has to at least try, And so he's forced to back down here when he says he doesn't know where it comes from. But like you said, you're right. He probably does know. Rampart then instructs Hauser to get to work on those arrests. Hauser offers to track down Hera himself, but is told that another squad is handling it. I do like this moment as well, because he's kind of like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Like, and we know what he means, basically.
Yeah.
And I think Rampart also does. He's kind of
I think he does too. Yeah. He's like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. I've got someone way more ruthless taking care of it.
Yeah, right. So he's kind of dejected here, but then there's this kind of the camera pans and we see Chopper snooping around, which is I think very funny. It's just always fun to see Chopper
when he just
around.
peeks around the corner.
Yeah. I know. And he's commenting or messaging back to Hera, who is watching over her parents' house or compound, whatever you call it. And Crosshair's elite squad informs them that Hera's gone, not in the home anymore, and they wonder if she maybe had fled the planet already. Crosshair's not convinced; doesn't think that she would leave without her parents, which I think is a fair, and smart call. I mean, we've kind of seen over and over here that Crosshair's smarter than the average clone, especially smarter than these. These aren't even clones; they're just regular people, right?
Right, yeah.
So she tells... No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say this is kind of like the beginning of these, the more human, not more human, but they're adding in more regular soldiers, not necessarily clones.
Well, this is a part of that operation, what the heck's it called? That Rampart calls it. Mantle. War Mantle.
Right, yes.
And this is kind of like a trial period, basically. He's like, hey, you're going to lead this squad. And depending on how it goes, it'll help us inform what we want to do with this kind of larger plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I definitely saw some theorizing about them being kind of the beginning of where we see Death Troopers come from, the ones that are a lot more skilled. They're not, we see them in Mandalorian, right? So they're highly skilled, they're highly trained, they're not as bad of a shot as regular stormtroopers.
They have scrambled comms. For some reason, because when they talk to each other,
right,
really
yeah.
But I like that theory. I'm in on it. By the way, I like their black clone armor, because they're really just wearing regular clone armor, but it's painted black, so I think it's obviously cool. And there's a green tinge to the visor and stuff, which calls back to the Death Troopers, because they have their black armor and also has a green.
Yeah, they just look very similar. And it makes sense that the Empire kind of started having some more highly trained soldiers, right?
Right.
So I can see why those correlations are being made.
I mean, they're essentially special forces, right?
Exactly.
And we first see the Death Troopers in Rogue One, and they kind of just fit right into that the world of the Empire. It kind of just made sense. There's I watched this really, really cool video. Eckhart's Ladder is the YouTube channel that I follow, and he does Star Wars and Halo and a couple other random stuff, but it's mostly Star Wars stuff.
Oh, okay.
And
I feel like I've probably seen a few of his videos.
He likes to talk. He talks about military strategy and different stuff like that. I think it's interesting, and he's quite good. And he talks about in this one video about how he has so much respect for Rogue One because it brought in so many interesting new visual ideas into the existing era of the Empire, right? At the time before Rogue One, it was kind of you had X-Wings and you had TIE fighters and you had TIE interceptors and stormtroopers and and snow troopers, and that was basically it, right? But Rogue One introduced sand troopers. It introduced the tank drivers. It introduced the Death Troopers. It introduced the U-wing. It introduces the TIE. It's not the TIE bomber, but it's got the wing on top of it. There's a couple different new designs that are introduced in that movie, and they all fit into seem to just fit. No one really questions it. Oh, of course, sand troopers. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
For sure, it would make sense. No, so, you're right. They're right. Yeah.
And we haven't really seen another movie do that as well. They're a little bit in Solo, but it doesn't. You got to kind of get those it actually raises more questions than it answers, where you have these soldiers that aren't stormtroopers, but it's what are they? Anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a tangent for a whole other time, but yeah, I think these special forces. I think you're probably right, and I think people are probably right that they are the precursors to what we see as the Death Troopers. So Rampart then instructs Hauser to go make those arrests, as we said. The elite troopers are hunting down Hera, and Hera tells Chopper that they need to make a transmission, so they need to head to the base. Okay, so that's where we leave off. We head to the Marauder. We cut to there. Omega is trying to fix their Gonk droid, which is, I think, very cute.
So cute.
Apparently, he has a defective power supply, and Hunter tells her not to bother because he's a defective unit, and she's like, "Don't worry."
So mean.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry. We're all defective, you know?
Yeah. I love how the Gonk droid like puts his head down, even though he doesn't have a head, but he's just like, whoa, like actually looks so sad. I'm like, I don't know how they're able to do that with those droids sometimes.
Literally, it's one sound and a tilt of the body.
A tilt of his body, and it just looks like he's hanging his head and is super sad. It's adorable. Yeah. I'm the biggest fan of all the droids in Star Wars.
Yes. I mean, I don't like. Are there droids that? Oh, by the way, I should mention, since last time we talked about droids, I finished the Dr. Aphra novel.
Oh, okay.
I guess it's like it was an audiobook that I listened to.
Gotcha.
And so I was introduced to 000
and BT.
Yeah. And you know what? You were like big fans. I'm not as big of. They're very like.
Read the comics.
Maybe, I don't know. I just think that their whole persona, and by the way, Dr. Aphra's persona is very grating. I find. And that like this whole thing, it's this whole twist on Han Solo and R2 and 3PO, but it's like it's so on the nose. Like, what's the most evil version of 3PO we can make? And it's like it just feels a little forced. So although I did kind of like where the story was headed and kind of how it. I don't know if I finished it. I got maybe about 3/4 of the way through it.
I disagree. And I think you have to read the comics because seeing them in the comics is way funnier and way better. And I think you would gain more of appreciation for them.
Maybe. We'll see. I'll report back once I've done that. Anywho, so they need to make a transmission. So we're on the Marauder, and they receive a transmission from an unknown frequency. It turns out it's Hera, and she's asking for help to free her parents. Hunter is annoyed at first that she gave her their comm frequency. But Omega says it's only for emergencies, and Tech kind of wonders, if she's maybe overreacting.
Right, because he's like, children often overreact.
Right.
Like, he knows so much about kids.
Right. Well, he's read about them.
Yeah,
and
right.
I like how, by the way, Omega's response is, "No, we don't," which is like,
I know.
How teenager of you. So we can't put ourselves in the line of. So the quote from Hunter here is, "We can't put ourselves on the line every time someone's in trouble." And, Omega's like, "Well, what do you mean? Why not? Isn't that our whole job?" And I think that kind of like really speaks to Hunter. So it works. She convinces them, and they head back.
Mm-hmm.
We cut back to Ryloth, and we get the ship popping out of hyperspace. It's very fun. I always enjoy that quite a bit. And the Bad Batch return to Ryloth and land at Cham's old hideout. And this is actually this is an outpost, and this is where we first meet Cham in the Clone Wars, actually, at this location. So this is kind of like an updated version of an older location we've seen before, which might be why it kind of looks kind of crappy.
Yeah, it's their old like military bunker from like when they were basically fighting against the Separatists. So it makes sense that it would probably be a little disheveled and not the best because they were kind of
meant visually
rebels
kind
back
of
then.
Boring.
Oh, I see.
And like not like visually interesting. It's like just
I get you.
Rock, So Chopper is there to greet them, and he's freaking out. And Hera, fills them in on kind of what's going on. She tells them that her parents, where they are, who her parents are, right, and what the Empire is doing and how they're framing them, and asks them to free them from the capital. And she even offers to pay them. The squad seems reluctant, but Omega is, kind of offering hope. There's this kind of this moment where Hunter says, I'll hear you out, but no guarantees. We'll check it out, right? I mean, I think the squad is just generally, or at least Hunter specifically. I mean, he seems to be coming around to this idea that they're kind of basically freedom fighters for hire, and at first he's got like very much like, no, we have to be like look up for ourselves. That's what's important. I've got my own stuff to worry about. But seemingly every opportunity they have to kind of make a difference, they do try to. But I think there's this moment in this episode where it feels like, maybe we're stretching ourselves too far, and like, is this really the best option for us? And he's trying to make a difficult decision, and he knows it's not maybe the most ethical decision,
Oh, 100%, yeah.
But like, he's like, it's just so risky. And I have to basically agree with him most of the time in this episode, where it's like, man, it's an awful lot to risk for, who knows what.
Oh, exactly. Like it's so much risk for, I mean, not that it's not a lot of reward, but he knows it's a very militarized planet right now and things are high stakes. I think they also, they mentioned that it's basically similar to like the last place they were, right? So
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And
so
I think there's a line later in the episode where he basically says, no money in the world is worth it if you're dead.
Well, yeah.
So it's like, okay,
Exactly.
fair. So back on Lesu, we get this dark mirroring of last week's speech at the Capitol. And now this time it's Rampart who's giving a speech to a crowd and informing them of his version of the events of which took place last week. He even tells them how they should feel. I think it's like, it's left you shaken, and kind of like really tries to set the narrative.
Yeah.
And we also find out that Ormfrita is still alive, by the way.
I
was
told
wrong.
you. I told
Yeah, but
you
like,
so.
again, I said that at the time I'd be annoyed by that, and I'm still annoyed by that because
We'll see.
he got shot in the head.
Yeah,
There's
got
no
a big fat head. And you don't know how their heads work.
Sure.
Maybe they got lots of jelly on top and their brains lower.
Maybe it's just full of. What does the jelly do?
We don't know what Lekus are full of. We don't know what their
Sure.
heads are full of. They're different alien species.
Fair enough. So he survived a headshot.
I mean, he could still be dead. Rampart could be lying to them, saying he's alive.
Yeah, but I think so I did go back and watch the moment from last week's episode, and his hand does move slightly.
Okay,
a little bit, but like, again, they're not using a stretcher. Like, it's all this weird stuff. Like, I don't know. And like, how much do you think Ormfrita was in on this whole thing? Like, I don't think he knew he was going to get shot in the head.
I don't think he knew he was going to get shot in the head.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
So that's crazy. And like, I just, how's
They'll
this gonna
explain
work?
it. Star Wars. They'll explain it somehow.
What's the point of shooting someone in the head if they can survive? I don't
told you that if Crosshair was going to shoot someone in the head, it would be dead center. He wouldn't just shoot them to like the left of their Leku.
But I guess the other question is like, why even keep Ormfrita alive? Like, why not just kill him and replace him with someone of your choice?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think because he's already cooperating with them pretty well.
That's
they're kind of, and he's already done like, I can never remember if he's in like cahoots with
he's 100% in the cahoots with the Empire.
No, with the Empire, but I mean the Emperor himself.
It's not. You don't know for sure, but I think you get the impression he may be. It's possible.
Yeah.
Anywho, because he does. Although I don't know, because in the episode where the Senate gets kidnapped by what's his name with the hat,
Cad Bane,
Cad Bane. The Senate, not Grievous, Sidious and Ormfrita are trapped in their office together, and he's acting all like very much like Palpatine and not like Sidious. And he's like, Master Jedi, we need your help. And it's like, it's no use. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of that stuff. So maybe not.
I think I also get him mixed up. I just had to Google it. I get him mixed up with Armida. Yeah, with like the big horns because they're both blue. So I guess that's speciesist of me.
Yeah, that is very species, and he does have his own Leku as well. But
they do. He has pointy Lekus. They're Lekus with like
little
Sharpie with horns on them. Yeah. So sometimes I when I think of the guy standing behind the Emperor, sometimes I think it's Ormfrita, but it's not.
Yeah, Masamida, cool character because he goes from being like this kind of like counselor to the Chancellor to being the Grand Vizier to the Emperor.
He looks very evil.
He's super evil.
Spiky horns.
But like, so what happens is when the Emperor is killed in Return of the Jedi, he tries to, or Masamida tries to take power, and ultimately just becomes this kind of puppet leader. Nothing's like the military doesn't listen to him, and he's kind of just trapped inside the palace for like months.
Oh, really?
And,
okay,
yeah, and he tries to sign this like accord with the New Republic. And like it's basically, again, it's just like this whole puppet thing, and it doesn't really matter because the whole military had already kind of left or been collapsed after Jakku, and then everyone else had left into the to go start the First Order and all that kind of stuff. So Masamune is an interesting character that doesn't really get explored much in any of the main stuff. So where were we? So yes, he's doing this speech, and the squad and Hare are watching the speech and from afar, and Omega notices that Crosshair is with them. And again, like, as soon as she mentions Crosshair, that creepy electronic musical cue plays.
Yeah, whatever.
And I just think it's very effective.
It is. He's got like, I don't know whether that's like his theme music or whatever, but it's good. I like it. It's very good for him.
It's just very haunting.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that happens, and they start kind of planning, or at least Hunter and the squad do, and they're not liking their options. So they can't walk in the front because if you remember, there's a light bridge. It's basically like a drawbridge that can be activated or deactivated to get into the capital.
Right, okay.
And so that's been deactivated. They can't walk in the front door. They can't fly in because they'll be detected. And there's too many troops. And they say it's similar to Raxus. Echo noting that it's odd since Ryloth is not a separatist planet, and kind of like there's this kind of like Echo, that's the whole like wake up
the issue.
Yeah, that's the problem here.
Yeah, it's like that's what everyone's been talking about. That's why this is happening.
Right,
it's not good.
So they're not really liking their plans, but as they discuss it, Hunter kind of notices this probe droid is watching them, and he takes it out with his knife. And it's a kind of a callback to the pilot when he shoots over the shoulder of Crosshair and shoots that probe droid that was sent after them. So he's really good at noticing the probe droids. Maybe if they were making less noise.
Yeah, they sound like they're super loud.
Right?
But I mean, he's got like superior senses when it comes to that kind of thing too.
That's true. That's true.
That's one of his heightened abilities.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so they're like, the Empire's going to know we're here, which is, I think, kind of a callback to Han Solo saying that in Empire. And anyway, so they know they're on the planet, and we see Crosshair finds out that they're there, and we find out that it's, in fact, true. They do know that they're there. So, which I think actually makes this episode more interesting than I maybe gave it credit for at the top. I'm not saying I liked it more than last week's episode necessarily, but I do appreciate that they changed up the formula a bit here, because typically we've seen a lot of these where like it's all about them coming in not knowing that they're there, right? And this changes the game. They know they're coming. They know, or at least they know they're on the planet. They don't know what they're doing there, but that allows us to do kind of some like reverse psychology stuff. There's some like, well, if they know that I know that we know, then that kind of stuff, which I think actually makes it like more interesting. So.
It's definitely adds more levels for sure. A little bit more threat, a little bit more, exactly, a little bit more complicated plans.
Right. Cue the electronic music, whatever how it goes. Okay, so back at the outpost, there's a brief exchange about why Cham is in captivity in the first place. Echo tells Hera that it's because he's someone people listen to, which makes him a threat to the Empire. Basically, his whole point is that the Empire needs, unrelenting loyalty, right? And that anything or anybody who challenges even a little bit, right, to take some of the spotlight away from the Empire and what they're doing for you and how they're the best and everything is working out the way that we say, is a threat because it challenges their narrative and it challenges the truth that they're portraying.
Oh, exactly. So, like they want everyone being the most obedient, and even if you slightly have your own views, they're like, "Nah, we got to crush that."
Yeah, so, exactly. That's enough of that, right? And so, Chopper and Tech let them know that they're. By the way, I like this. Chopper and Tech come out of the ship like they were working together. I was like, "Ooh, okay, that's kind of fun." What were they kind of like? What were they scheming together in the ship? Anyway, they've been listening to, I guess, Imperial comms, and they're all over the comms, and they know they're there, and they've lost the element of surprise. So Hunter at this point tries to back out of the mission. He's saying it's a suicide mission, and that being strategic means knowing your limitations. He's saying this to Echo, which I like that there's a couple of the uses of the word strategic in this episode because it's really trying to highlight the fact that, hey, remember when they had that little chess match? And she obviously won because she's on the mission in the first place.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So, and that like, okay, you need to think strategically. If you have a strategic mind, this is kind of a lesson in that. right?
Definitely, yeah.
And to be fair and to be honest, Hunter's right. They're outgunned, and they no longer have the element of surprise. Like, what's your play here?
Well, for
So,
sure, because they know they're there and they know exactly why they're there. So,
well,
or at least they can assume.
Yeah, they can presume at least. So Hunter's right. And Omega gets upset with him, to Hunter, basically like being like, "Whoa, like show a little bit of like tact,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's just trying to save her family.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how she scolds him there because he basically just tells Hera, like, straight up, no, like, we're not doing it anymore, backs out, and she's heartbroken, obviously.
Yeah. And so Omega basically guilt trips him by saying that, she'd do the same for him if she was in Hera's position.
Yeah. Perfect. Loved it.
She's like, damn it. He's like, man, she's right. So we picked back up with Rampart and Hauser talking about the arrests. Rampart wants more, seeing he wants all of Cham's supporters arrested. We touched on this earlier, but this is where he mentions that, like, if they keep rounding up peaceful citizens, that'll inspire an uprising. And he's right, because look to, literally any real-world example. As soon as regular people are being rounded up on the street by the police, not a good sign.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
It's the recipe for civil unrest. It's just not going to happen.
No, it's obviously going to upset people if their neighbors and their friends are getting arrested for literally doing nothing.
Exactly.
Just for being associates or just knowing someone. It's like, yeah, you can't do that because that's very obviously going to upset the people.
Right. So, but again, Rampart does not care. And he's basically saying, well, he's like, if that's the case, then we'll arrest them too. Right. And then he uses this line, which is that, like, peace has a cost, which is, a very fascist point of view.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
that we know better than you, and that to question it is in fact to question peace itself.
Exactly.
And that's just not how it works. So it's really gross, but nothing we're not used to seeing from an Imperial at this point.
No, it's very Empire-esque, right? Like, they don't care. They only want what they want. They'll arrest literally everyone. They'll blow up a whole planet. Like, they don't care.
Nothing is gonna stop them. Right.
No.
Exactly. So as they enter Rampart's office, they're interrupted by Crosshair informing them that Clone Force 99 is on the planet. And I really like this because as Crosshair's having this conversation and he mentions Clone Force 99, there's this shot of Hauser who's kind of like eavesdropping a little bit, and then pans back to the kind of the main conversation, but it kind of gives this impression that, like, hey, he's thinking, like, what's, the gears are turning in Hauser's head. Not clear if he knows or knew who Clone Force 99 is. Probably not. But he knows probably of them, or at least knows, like, what that means, which is enough. So
I would assume so. Yeah.
So Crosshair tries to warn Rampart about the Bad Batch, but he dismisses him, and he's basically saying that he has a full battalion of troopers, and kind of changes the subject and kind of like puts the pressure back on Crosshair, and he gives him crap for not finding Hera. Like, you better concentrate on that because that's really your mission. And then Crosshair and Hauser have a bit of a stare down, which I didn't really understand that exchange, but
I think it's because Rampart said, if you don't do it, I'll find somebody else who will, or kind of thing. And I think he's so I think Crosshair's assuming he means Hauser, so I think he's kind of looking at Hauser as like competition. Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed from that.
Fair enough. Just like there's just a moment here where it's like, the working for the Empire is such a high stress job. You're constantly having to, like, think politically and, like, how you can one up your other, like, basically your partners, your coworkers. You're constantly figuring out how you can, like, worm your way up the system, and then any false move and you're thrown in prison or murdered by Darth Vader. So it's like, why would
I know.
I don't know.
Why would anyone work with? There's no camaraderie. There's no, everyone's stabbing each other in the back, and if you make any mistakes, you're dead. Like, it's just.
But I guess that's not how it's portrayed from the outside. It's like, come, like, see the galaxy, But and once you're in, like, you can't leave,
No, of course not, because then Vader will hunt you down.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know. If you think you're a random stormtrooper, I think you'll probably avoid the wrath of Vader hunting you down as a the deserter. But
yeah, it's true. Just depends how much you know, I guess.
Right. Anyway, so they have that little stare down, and then we go back to the outpost, and Hera is upset that Hunter gave up. She's like, "Man, like, what are we supposed to do now?" Chatting with the Chopper, and Omega and her have like a heart to heart, and she basically tells him, Hunter's gonna come around. Don't worry. And Hera wonders why Omega can trust them so much, and you get this really earnest answer that I really appreciated from the show. And she said that it's because they're her brothers.
Yeah.
And which I don't recall. Like, do you remember her mentioning like calling her brothers or anything like that?
I don't really remember. I don't think so.
I don't think I've ever heard them refer to her as their sister. That's for sure.
No, they haven't. I guess. Yeah, no, I guess not. But yeah, you're right. I don't think we've actually heard her say that yet.
So it's very sweet, and
I get that relationship obviously from them already, but yeah, it hasn't really fully been said yet.
Right. It was very much hinted at, or it's like subtext, and now it's just text. But
yeah,
it's just very sweet, and I think what really makes this episode work is that you get Hera and Omega working together, and it's rare that we've seen Omega interact with other kids. So there's a kind of more of this kind of like natural camaraderie between these two of similar age.
100%.
I think it works really well, and it helps Omega open up a little bit. So she convinces Hera that all they need to do is come up with a plan and present it to Hunter, and he'll listen because it's strategic.
Yeah.
And there's that strategic word again, but she's kind of onto something here. Basically, she says, you know the planet better than anybody, so you can help come up with a plan because you're the expert here, right? And that is strategic, quote unquote.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So we cut back to the holding cells, and Hauser comes down to speak with Cham. Now, this is, I think, a very interesting scene. Cham finally calls him out and says, "So this is the side you've chosen," implying that he's taken the wrong side. I think it's obvious. He tries to reason with them, Hauser does, by saying that he didn't really have a choice. You attacked the the convoy. What did you expect was going to happen, right? I mean, he's right on one sense, right? If you attack an Imperial convoy, you're probably going to get arrested.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But on the other hand, and Eleni makes a great point here, saying that like, hey, we weren't given a choice. They threatened Hera. We have to do something about it.
And exactly, like they both have valid reasons there, right? Like it's like they're obviously not going to stand by and let that happen to their daughter. At the same time, they have to suffer the consequences from it too. So, but yeah, it's I can see that. Yeah, it's not a rough conversation, but I feel like they're all kind of like, at least Hera's parents are frustrated and upset about it, right?
Well, no, exactly, and they're in on they're at this point they're very much in on the kind of the manipulation, right? Like, hey, we see what's going on here,
right.
Just because we understand the realities of the fact that, we were forced into this action that we didn't want to take necessarily,
right?
But knowing that has happened doesn't change the fact that it's bullshit.
Oh, exactly.
So, and Hauser tries to convince them to tell him where Hera is so he can protect her, but Cham, doesn't trust him anymore. And I really like the line where it's like, you just like you swore to protect the planet, we trusted you once, Hauser.
Yeah.
But we're not going to make that mistake again,
Yeah.
And I think that's compelling stuff. So
it definitely is. Yeah. You can like see the hurt in Hauser's face too.
Yeah.
And a little bit of the frustration because like we know he actually wants to help, but they don't. Like they don't know whether he's just been told to come there and get info out of them, right? So I totally understand why they don't trust him right now.
Totally. And like if I'm being honest, his kind of like sales job is pretty shitty here. Like it does feel very like ham-fisted, like just tell me where she is and I'll probably promise to protect her. Like you gotta, like, I think you need to appeal to them a little bit more than just kind of this like kind of backhanded like, well, what did you expect was gonna happen? Like that's not gonna work.
No, of course not.
So he leaves with hat in hand, but I mean obviously he feels like he's betrayed them, but he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of like between a rock and a hard place here. So like I said, he leaves hat in hand. Back at the outpost, Hera and Omega present their plan. The plan is to attack the refinery by air to draw reinforcements from the capital. Hera's been watching their movements, and she knows that if something happens at the refinery, they'll send people from the capital. And they then need to take out the unmanned autocannons by deactivating the control console. By the way, I do like this one line from Tech here, who basically says like, "Oh, autocannons, notoriously terrible." Right?
Yeah.
So that it just sets up like, oh, when we see these in like on the Death Star and like how they can't hit the broadside of a barn,
Right.
it's because they're just poorly designed or poorly built or whatever. And
Which kind of makes sense.
Which it does totally, because it's like, well, yeah, probably a person's gonna be better at that than like these auto detecting.
Oh, definitely,
computers are gonna do. But the what I think is more interesting there though is that last week they Eleni presented like, or pointed out to them and said like, hey, I thought that this wasn't a military installation and like all this stuff, and Rampart's response was, oh, this is just to protect the Ryloth.
Mm-hmm.
And really what it is, I think, is, and like we talked about it last week, it's like they're not there to protect Ryloth so much as the refinery, but regardless what it is, it's security theater, right? They might not be very effective, but they look big and powerful
and intimidating. Yeah.
Right.
It's not meant for like outsiders. It's meant to intimidate the people there for sure.
A little bit of both, but it's just not as good at one of the other of those two jobs. So okay. So anyway, so that's the part of the plan. Deactivate the control console, and this involves Chopper slipping in undetected with the other droids. Hunter and Echo will then scale the wall of the Capitol and free Cham while the distraction is happening. Hunter, to everyone's surprise, assigns Hera and Omega to watch over Chopper on their own, which I think says a couple things. Everyone's shocked and surprised because he's been so protective of Echo, right? It's obviously risky to let them go alone.
Oh, for sure it is, yeah.
Right? But I think this again, kind of pointing back to that conversation that he and Omega had right at the 3 episodes ago at the end, when he basically said, I guess it's 2 episodes ago, like, hey, I promise not to like cut you out of the missions if you win this. And obviously she did, presumably. And him basically saying, okay, I need to trust her. I need to try something to trust her. It seemed like a low risk maneuver. Like, okay, just watch over the droid, and if something happens, report back. It seems fairly easy, and I can trust them to do that on their own. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. It was supposed to be very harmless and very like safer. It's like, okay, you're at a distance, you're just watching. Like it shouldn't be too risky.
But like, so there's I try to imagine like a real world scenario, right? Like, okay, these are adult soldiers, and they have like 12-year-olds with them. Okay, thinking through this, and I'm like, okay, you're gonna send these 12-year-olds to like what to spy on the enemy. Well, which calls back to last week's episode, when it's like, why would you bring my daughter into this, you psychopath?
Yeah.
Right? So it is pretty crazy that Hunter's basically using Omega as a child soldier.
Yes.
It's like, let's not think about it too much, because the real world implications are kind of mind bending.
Yes.
But it is clearly a bad idea. And that's probably why people are all like pretty shocked about it at this point. And then even to make it even matters worse, there's this line that Hunter says at the very end of the scene where he says, I guess we'll follow your lead. And he's looking right at Hera. And it's like, is this supposed to be a callback to her being a leader later? Because they should be following her lead. Just because she knows the planet.
Just because it's her, or her plan or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like in Hunter's defense, I feel like he's tried to not take Omega on these things, and he's tried to push her off to the side and not giving her things to do, and it hasn't worked. So he's just saying like, okay, this time I'm going to give her a task and we'll see how that goes, like something not too dangerous, and hopefully it goes well. And it does.
I think it does mostly go well. I mean,
she adds her own flair to it,
right? As much as anything with Chopper can go well. So this is where the mission starts, and so Chopper gets there aboard a transport and sneaks past the checkpoint. Classic droid stuff here. This is like callback to like the droid episodes of Clone Wars.
I love sneaky droids.
And like the thing is though, they're not ever that sneaky.
No, he's like bouncing around and flying over things and just like the whole time.
Oh, it's like fly casual. Like it's not really flying that casual, that Chop.
He's just like bumping around and jumping over things, and I love it.
So when Chopper gets to the control console, he zaps another astromech unit, and it's like this like other R2 unit type thing, and and he informs Hera that in fact he can't take it offline for some
Yeah.
reason. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't take it offline, right? And he's making a bunch of noise, and is easily captured, right? Because the clones are like, "What are you doing here?" And because like there's like steaming pile of droid next to him.
Yeah, it's like you're standing at this like
Right.
whatever
Super important
thing,
console.
yelling.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, you're not the most subtle is
No.
what we're really saying here. So Omega and Hera decide that they need to save Chopper. They start scheming. And they need to take out the console, save Chop. And the idea is to use one of the transports. And back at the Capitol, we see Hunter take out 2 clones as they reach the top of the wall. I think it's very cool. Just kind of quick scene. And then back with Hera and Omega, they are hijacking a transport and tell Tech not to shoot them down.
Yeah.
As they take off and kind of like spin around and like they don't really know what's going on. And like, to be honest, it's a pretty good distraction.
Oh, for sure. A child trying to steal a plane is
yes,
crashing into things and going sideways. And,
I mean,
yeah,
it could for sure go worse. I mean, at least she's had a little bit of training, you know. By the way, I like the line from like, "Well, you said you wanted to be a pilot, so here's your chance.
Here you go."
Yeah. And so they finally figured out. They shoot the console, and it blows up. Big explosion. Chopper uses the distraction to zap the 2 clones guarding him. First of I'm sure many murders on his part. And flies aboard while Hera and Omega use the transport weapons to destroy the console. Luckily, I was wondering about this as I rewatched it. It's like the autocannons that are supposed to protect the base. Like, are they not able to aim into the base? Like, do they not like? I guess they can't. Like, oh, it's an Imperial transport. They're not going to be able to be reprogrammed fast enough to be able to take it out. So
yeah, probably not. Yeah.
So they give Tech and Wrecker the all clear, and they fly in and they use this like drift move and take out the cannons with the rear cannon, and it's really, really cool. But what's coolest about it is that I think it's a nod to Star Wars Squadrons, because that is a video game that came out last year, and it's a flight combat game set in the Star Wars universe, and it introduces this idea of drifting. It's like a game mechanic into the game, so you can kind of like if you have someone on your 6, you can kind of do this drift to kind of like come around and like get get behind them or whatever.
Okay.
And so I think, and they do this, by the way, they do this kind of like speed boost first, which is like an element of how you do the drift in Squadrons. You need to do a speed boost, and then you kind of like kick in this like side booster thing that like spins you.
Oh, you don't pull the e-brake?
Well, like you essentially do. It's like it's the Star Wars equivalent of pulling the e-brake.
Of Tokyo drifting?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a call to that, and I think it's very, very cool. So hats off to that little callback. I think it's really awesome. And they get to see some really cool explosions. The clones do, in fact, call for reinforcements. And back at the Capitol, Rampart is pissed. He tells Hauser to guard the Capitol. He takes care of the refinery situation. Cut to the holding cells where Hunter and Echo are successful in freeing Cham, Eleni, and Gobi. By the way, there's also a bunch of others there with them, so they also get freed along with them.
Right.
For them. And Gobi is surprised to see them. He's like, well, they're mercenaries, but I didn't hire them for this. Which I thought was his only line of dialogue, basically, for the entire episode. Any thoughts on this, how this mission went?
I mean, I liked it. I enjoy anything with Chopper, but it is that very like Rebels-esque thing of, okay, this plan didn't work, very quickly switch and do something a little bit more reckless and a little bit more. Yeah, think on your feet, exactly. So having the 2 girls there like steal this plane it's also like, again, it's very Rebels. Like that's the same stuff that they do. Hera, like they're constantly trying to steal, Imperial ships.
TIE fighters.
TIE fighters and, big ships, right? Shuttles, they're just like, that's their whole thing. And half the time is stealing these ships so they can have them for their Rebel fleet.
Well, it's guerrilla warfare, essentially.
Yeah. So I just really like these kind of nods to what she becomes and how her and Chopper work together and how their relationship like basically progresses from this on their probably first kind of mission together, right? And then what we see in later years. So I don't know, I liked it.
Yeah, so did I. I think it's very much, I think, a callback to Rebels and what they're doing there, and I think it's fun.
Yeah.
So, then things get serious again. So Crosshair is about to take off with his squad to reinforce the refinery, but he has this kind of like he's like, wait, and tells them to stop as he realizes it's a distraction, and decides to stay behind. And Hauser watches this from afar. It's like one of the only scenes where he's wearing his helmet. I think it's very funny.
Yeah.
He's always just holding it in his arm. And I think it's on purpose because we need to see his face. We use this, like, they do a lot of, like I said, subtle animation with his face.
For sure, yeah.
So, anywho, he's standing and he's watching. And Crosshair has his squad kind of line up at the main door while he sets up in a sniper position. Meanwhile, inside, just before Hunter, Cham, and the rest are about to walk into the trap, Hauser appears and warns them. And they're basically like, why should we trust you? And Hauser kind of repents. He admits that what the Empire is doing is wrong, apologizes for not doing something sooner. And by the way, this is kind of what you should have been doing. This is what you should have done earlier.
Yes,
it might not have worked.
Absolutely.
But at least, so at this point, you have like a chip to play. But yeah, he's kind of been like, this is all wrong. I'm sorry. And they decide to use Orn Freytau's private shuttle to escape. And they tell Hauser that they should leave he should leave because they'll know that it was him who helped them. But Hauser refuses. He says that he won't abandon his squad. They're good men, and that he needs to try to get through to them. And so this is what I mean about like these subtle facial animations, because we see it on his face right before he confronts his squad.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Like this kind of like, okay, this is a big moment. I need to like pump myself up for this. This kind of weight lifted off his shoulders, right? Where he's like, man, like he's been carrying this guilt. And you guys kind of see it kind of melt off of him, And it's really, I think, top-notch stuff. This is the best part of the episode.
Oh, yeah. Opinion. This whole scene here, and even the way I think Hunter kind of like turns back and kind of looks at him, I thought they were setting up something way worse. I for sure thought he was going to be dead at the end of this episode. Well,
I mean, I think he is going to die.
I think so too. I know. This whole part here, I was like, oh man, like they're going to kill him.
So here's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay?
So here's what's going to happen. This is my theory. It's not much of a stretch. But we've been thinking about this for a while. Like, what is Hauser's inclusion? What does it mean? Right? And I'm kind of skipping ahead here. He does, he opens the door, and his kind of the men are like, oh, they're ready to kind of like take out who's inside, but they see that it's Hauser, and they stand down. And he gives this speech, and he calls out the hypocrisy of their mission, and he denounces the Empire, and he said, what are we doing? We were ordered, we were sent here to free the world, to protect these people, and now we're ordered to target the very people we swore to protect.
Exactly, yeah.
And he says, I won't be a part of this any longer, and he throws down his weapon and asks if others will join him. So some do, but others don't. And Crosshair orders them to be arrested, and they Crosshair and Hauser, Crosshair makes his escape, and there's this, like you mentioned, this last look. Now, I don't know about you, and I'll get back to my theory in a second, but I don't know about you, but did you not feel like I was yelling at the TV saying, like, tell him about the chip? Like, you're really not going to tell him about the control chip? You're just going to like let him walk away, and he's like, that he knows what he's about to do, and you're not going to give him this valuable piece of information that could totally like change the dynamic. But no, he keeps his mouth shut.
I didn't even think about that, because you're right. Like Hunter easily could have been like, hey, like
FYI, yeah,
there's not really much point. You might get a few, and I get it. Like Hauser doesn't want to abandon his brothers, right? He says they're good men. Like he really assumes or hopes that a lot of them are feeling the same way as he is. So he hopes maybe he can save them or, fix things. But you're right. Like Hunter easily could have been like, come with us instead, and we'll figure this out, right? Like, we'll get the chip out of your head, and then maybe we can come back and try and get your squad.
Well, I mean, you don't even necessarily, like, at this point, like, I don't think he even needs to do that. He just needs to give him that information so that he has it. You can spread the word, right? That it's like, hey, listen, it's not necessarily your fault. Like you might feel conflicted, but you might feel differently if you knew that that reason you are following these orders in the first place is because you're programmed to. You know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, it's so true.
So I think it's one of those things where I think they're doing it on purpose because what is going to come, and I'm coming back to my theory here, relies on them not knowing about the chip. That they can't reveal the chip widely, at least not yet, and that there's, I think, and potentially, and maybe for the best, for better, because it creates more of this kind of like psychological and kind of moral challenge to the clones that is more interesting, I guess, if they don't realize that there's a chip in their head that's making them do that. So I can make that, I can see that, but at the same time, it's like, from a person-to-person perspective, Crosshair should have told him. That's my thought.
You mean Hunter should have told him?
Sorry,
yeah.
Hunter should have told him. Yeah.
And I mean, I can see that maybe he didn't because it's like there wasn't enough time, because it's like, we got to get out of here, and I don't really have enough time to yell at this dude, there's a chip in your head, and then bail, and then the guy be like, what are you talking about? Because it is more than like a 10-second conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where is it? How do I get it out?
Yeah, like, exactly. What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's a lot more to that conversation. But at the same time, there's still that bit of being like, hey, like, there's more to this than you know. But yeah, you're right. That I didn't think about that.
So here's my theory, okay? And this is why I said I think the introduction of Hauser is so fascinating. Because what's happening here is that Hauser, of his own accord, came to the conclusion that the Empire is full of shit.
Yeah.
And that they are doing bad things. And that he shouldn't be a part of it. And that it goes against the very mission that they were originally set out on. And that he, as an individual, has the moral obligation to stand up to tyranny and to oppression. And this is what I mean by it being like this fascinating moral quandary. So he, I think, is going to be court-martialed and probably executed. Now, I can kind of imagine how it's going to be. Is either going to be a hanging or some other thing, and we're not going to see it happen, but we'll kind of like see his legs go limp or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's going to be one of the inciting incidents in a theory that people have been banning about for a while, and it's something that was in Legends for a long time, which is this idea of a clone uprising.
Clone uprising, yeah, for sure.
And that Hauser, having now made this speech, convinced a couple of his men to go along with him. By the way, these guys are like, yeah, you're right, and then instantly get arrested.
Yeah,
so it's like, okay. So, and they probably knew that when they knew that was happening. But anyway, so now he's convinced this group, and now, Rampart, in his, ultimate wisdom, is going to be like, I need to set an example, right? And instead of doing the thing he expected or wanted from setting an example of Hauser, he's actually going to trigger a much larger uprising. And by the way, it's going to help redeem the clones in the audience's eyes as being, turns out they were good all along.
Of course, yeah.
And so it's cool in some ways because, again, it introduces this idea of this moral quandary. But ultimately, I think there is something to be said about like sticking to your guns and being like, no, the clones did turn bad, and that sucks, but that's just the way she goes. And like, we do know that there's this like some ideas that like we're gonna see an Imperial Commander Cody in the Obi-Wan show. That's been rumored for a little bit now, and that Tremor Morrison's been cast for that. But I just
interesting.
We don't know. It's just rumors, right? And like obviously that is awesome, and although it deals with the same like ideas, right?
Of course, yeah.
But I'm a little conflicted on whether or not I think we should, so quickly, redeem an entire army of clones that murdered all the Jedi.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And by the way, and whatever they do is obviously not effective. Like it has no lasting effect on the Empire anyway.
No.
So, what does that even really mean? And like, then what happens to them? Do they get like? Are they like? Is there like a genocide of clones? Like, what happens then? Like, and like, what are the implications of that? I mean, I don't know, but there's lots to kind of.
Well, exactly, yeah. So.
Anyway, thoughts on that idea?
Yeah. No, honestly, I think that's a really good theory for sure. Like that is something that he was able to turn a couple of these guys, and then, you know, other clones were maybe thinking the same thing, but they didn't speak up right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they see their brothers basically get executed for it, and they're like, "Hey, like that's not right,"
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that would make sense why they can't bring the chips into it, right? It's a little bit more of a free will and a free thinking kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
And like,
think, yeah.
because what are you going to do? Like, systematically remove everybody's chips? Like, it's just
E-
probably not going to happen.
no, exactly. Or yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
I mean,
That
here's
and
the other way of going about it would be to be like to fake some sort of like scenario for Hauser, and this is complete rewriting the episode, right?
mhm,
Fake kind of scenario where like you inform Hauser of what's going on, right? You set it up some sort of way so that he doesn't get found out, at least not right away.
right.
And then he has the clones come in for like routine physicals and like has the chips removed one by one, and
Mhm.
then kind of like has like a little like his own little squad of unchipped clones that he can like call on when the time comes. But like obviously that didn't happen, but I think that would have been a fascinating way of going.
Yeah, that would involve maybe some sort of escape and then contacting the Bad Batch or, something like that.
Right, but
But
he needs to be on the inside for that to work, and
right,
it's like if
exactly.
yeah, and like we see how it works with Hux when he pretends to be like, oh, they got away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, it didn't work, you
No.
know. So anywho, so back at the outpost. By the way, there's this, I think, poorly edited brief shot earlier of them escaping as they agree to meet at their rendezvous, which I think just interrupts kind of the pacing of this kind of standoff like scene. And by the way, there is this also earlier. There is this brief shot of Crosshair as after he orders their arrest. Again, this kind of subtle facial animation, and we see it a little bit later on as well. But like there's something happening behind his eyes.
There
He's
definitely
thinking about
is.
stuff.
Yeah, there definitely is. I thought he was just gonna start shooting them, honestly.
Oh,
But
interesting. Okay,
I
so
that's kind of what I thought immediately. I was like, ooh, is he just gonna be like, is he trying to think about what he's like, do I just take these guys out now or do I
just
let them be arrested?
so angry, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. I was curious about that, but I was surprised he actually got them to arrest them. I for
Yeah,
sure thought he was just gonna be like, they're traitors. Like,
yeah,
you know,
execute them.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
He probably doesn't have that authority, I would guess, maybe especially because Hauser's
maybe.
higher up, but
Is he? I mean, I don't know.
he
It's
has
not
the
clear, but
well,
maybe
he's got the pauldrons and
he's a
stuff,
captain. I
so I
just
think
don't know.
he's a captain, yeah. So I
I
feel
don't know
like
what
I don't know
Crosshair's
what
rank
Crosshair
is.
is either, but I feel like he wouldn't have the authority to like execute a captain
I guess, and I get
without
the impression,
any.
right? Yeah, right. Without any like due justice or whatever.
Yeah, like you gotta, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's more complex than that for the record, but I think we'll see. So and like I said, there's this brief shot of them escaping. So they meet back at the outpost, and Eleni tries to pay Hunter, but he refuses to take it. This is kind of like the second time he's done that,
Yeah.
saying that they'll need it more, and warns them that these imperial occupations are happening on other planets. Cham promises to organize a response, and that he'll have to go back to war. And by the way, he says we'll have to organize that. There's a hint at kind of rebellion here. This is kind of that start of, or at least hints at this kind of idea of a rebellion. Though we do know, and I'd like this idea, this connection between him saying, by the way, this is happening on other planets, but also Cham not caring about that.
Right.
That it's all about
Ryloth.
Ryloth, exactly. So Hunter once again refuses the call for the rebellion, again citing that he has other concerns, pointing to Omega and his squad. As Cham and his family prepare to leave, we learn that Tech has taught Hera how to scramble a ship signature. So I think that's like kind of a cute little like, hey, look how she learned how that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And Hera and Omega make their goodbyes. There's this kind of she calls her co-pilot, and tells her to keep an eye on her brothers. They're gonna need it. And then thanks her for believing in her, which I think there's this kind of like, if things had maybe gone differently, maybe she wouldn't have become the Hera we know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
that,
no,
Omega
that's
played
true.
a role in that, but she never talked about it ever again.
I mean, not in Rebels, but
I get the impression that we'll get an adult Omega at some point speaking with an adult Hera.
Yeah.
After later in the future.
I get the feeling that Hera doesn't necessarily like, just from the stuff in Rebels, she doesn't talk about her past as much. It's a little bit too painful. Like,
That's
she's
true.
not getting along with her father, and they have different views on how the rebellion should be run. So I feel like that's why she doesn't talk about it as much, because it's hard.
Yeah, that's fair. And so Omega waves as Hera and her family take off in their shuttle, and they go off to do whatever they're going to do. And then there's this quick shot back at the refinery. There's that same dark musical note playing as Rampart looks over the wreckage of the attack, flames flickering in his face.
Yeah, very eerie.
Yes, totally. Very cool. He admits that he underestimated the Bad Batch, wishing that they were fighting for them and not against them, which I think has got this kind of like this, also a bit of like creepiness to it. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to put their chips back in their heads? Like, how's that going to work? That's obviously not going to happen. So, and Crosshair requests to hunt them down, permission to hunt them down, and which is granted to him. But as Rampart leaves, we once again get a lingering look at Crosshair's face. And he looks conflicted. I think conflicted.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about it more since you said it, and maybe it is a little bit more of like him seeing now another clone kind of pushing back, right? So maybe he's thinking like, hey, maybe there is something to this, like it's not just the Bad Batch with their screwed up chips and their wild ways, right? It's other clones are thinking the same thing, and other clones are starting to also be like, hey, this is wrong. So, maybe he's thinking about what side he's on, and maybe whether it's the right one or not, or maybe he's just full of hatred and murder.
I'm going to go with the former.
Yeah.
Mostly because that was like, I was hinting at it, but I'm thinking back to that scene early in the season where he sits back in his bunk in Camino, and he's like looking at the scratches on the wall. And this is after he's been reprogrammed and they've escaped and everything. And he's got this new squad with him. And I get the impression that like we keep going back and forth on whether or not, like, are they going to redeem him or not? Is he going to die or not? I think
it's hard to know.
I just like, it is hard to know. And I think that's like credit to the show because like, it's a big question mark. And I think one of the best things about the show is that the stakes are very real. And we've talked about this before. And how exciting it is to have a Clone Wars style show where we don't know where every character that's going to live or die, minus like 2, where it's like, okay, it turns out Rex and Ahsoka, neither of them died because we assumed both of them would, right? But no, neither of them did. In fact, so much so that they lived on and died happily ever after or whatever, because we don't know how Rex dies, and as far as we know, Ahsoka's alive but maybe dead at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, just because you hear her voice.
Right, exactly. We don't know. Right? Oh, actually, well, we know she's alive after Return of the Jedi because she goes to, because Mando's set up there and she goes and talks to...
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But we just don't know, like, but Rise of Skywalker, she may be dead at that point.
Right.
But also maybe not because Yoda's able to do that and not be dead. So,
That's fair.
So, who knows? All I'm saying is this is a show that's able to say, these are all characters, any of them can die, including Crosshair, or Rampart, or literally anybody, because we've never seen these characters before, and they've never appeared in any other media, and maybe they retcon it so that like, hey, that character in the background, that turns out that's Adult Omega, they might do that. They did that with Rex, but
with Rex, yeah.
But that being said, I like where this is going, and I just don't know what to make of Crosshair. I think he is going to have a crisis of conscience if he's not already having it now. And he's going to have to make a decision. He likely still dies. I think that's most likely. I think at this point, like if anyone's going to die, it's going to be him.
Probably. I think so too. Yeah, but you're right. They're doing a very good job of making you completely despise him one moment, and then a few moments later, not a few moments later, but the next episode or whatever, you do see a little bit of conflict, right? So it's kind of interesting. Like
I wonder if he will be like a leader in the clone uprising. Wouldn't that be cool? Like he's like he's gonna like, you know what, no, I've had this, like he's really good, and he's gonna like help them take out Camino, and like that's where he dies, where he was born, which is kind of like this cool roundabout thing. So I don't know, we'll see. There's still, what is this, the 12th episode? There's still 4 episodes left, so lots of time. We don't even know if there's a second season yet, but I hope there is, because there's just so much of this like era that's so interesting, and like I'd like to explore more.
Oh, me too. I would really love to see this very early Empire and more, how more bits and pieces about like how the rebellion starts and more about that. And there's just
and like
there's
were
lots
the Bad Batch involved in the rebellion at any point?
Exactly.
Probably were.
Yeah.
But how? And why did we never see them? And like that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, exactly.
anywho, any final thoughts on this week's episode?
Yeah, overall I enjoy this one for sure. I think you're right. Like you know what? I think I still liked it equal to last
Well,
week's.
fair enough. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
I was like,
basically
to
two
me,
parts of a whole. So
yeah, to me it's kind of just like almost like one big episode. Um I really hope Hauser doesn't die in the next episode. I would
me
like
too, but
to.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm hoping there's maybe some like last ditch second
I don't think
bad
anyone's coming. I
batch.
don't think
I
anyone's coming
know.
back to save
I
Hauser.
know. Probably not, but
Maybe
yeah.
Cham. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. But no, I'm just like we just said, I'm really enjoying learning about all these new things about the beginning of the empire and the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
the uprising and how it's happening and how the different planets are feeling and what's going on. So I'm just honestly excited to see more next week because I don't really know where we're going next week other than some sort of manhunt. So
Right. It's what's it called? It's
infestation or something. See, to
infestation.
me
Infested. Yeah.
that sounds like it's an off episode. It sounds like we're not going to get crosshair stuff,
I
but we'll
mean,
see.
either that or they think that there's an quote unquote infestation of like clones who are rebelling. That might be part of it. So
Yeah, maybe that's true.
it's a bit of a stretch. So on that note, I'll give my kind of quick final thoughts here. I just don't think it's as stylish or as tight as last episode. Like I like the change of the formula. This goes back to the formula for the season, and that's fine. But I just really appreciated the boldness of last week's episode, and the introduction of Hauser was really cool. The way that they set up, like again, I thought like cool, let's murder Ornfrita, like awesome, like that's like this is all really cool stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And again, just super like it's so paced so well, and the action is so great, and like I think it's the best episode of the season. I really do. And this is just not quite as good. It's just more of the same, and the same is good. It's just not as it didn't reach those same heights. Typically, in my now brief experience with doing this kind of stuff is that these penultimate episodes in these kind of these arcs are sometimes like the second act or the calm before the storm. Some of these kind of moments. It's hard to say in a 2-episode piece, but like the finale isn't necessarily as satisfying for me as the kind of the setup to the finale. And if, assuming this is a 2-episode arc and there's a third part to it, that first bit, the quote unquote prequel to the finale of that arc was better.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's just so much more dramatic. So I just appreciate it more. There's a lot of subtlety in this episode, and obviously I really appreciate what Hauser is doing here and how that might pay off. That's really exciting. But just generally, again, they're both great, but just I think last week's was a little bit stronger. So anywho, we'll be back next week. Next week is season 1, episode 13. No, 13. Yeah. Infested. We'll be back to talk about that. But in the meantime, head over to we're at the end of the episode. I'm stumbling over my words here. In the meantime, head over to our website, smallscreenstarwars.com. Find everything that we're doing, including our main show. We just released an episode late last week. That was quite fun. We talked about Batman, the new animated Batman movie. We talked about Black Widow, a little bit about Loki. I've now seen the Loki finale. What an amazing finale that is. Speaking of finales that I think pay off are very satisfying, so that was really great. So you can find that stuff on our Tower Babble podcast over there. You can follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast, and head over to the website, like I said, towerbabble.ca. And like I said, we'll be back next week with more Bad Batch. We'll talk to you then.